My name's Ethan, and what I'm about to tell you is something I've tried to forget, but it keeps clawing its way back into my mind. It happened in the summer of 2013, back when I was stationed at an Air Force base in Northern California. I was 27, restless, and always looking for a way to escape the monotony of base life. That's where my buddy Mark came in. He was a mechanic with a knack for fixing anything and a love for the outdoors that matched mine. One scorching August day, we decided to take his beat-up Jeep and explore the wilds of the Sierra Nevada mountains just to get away from the heat and the concrete. The air was thick with the smell of pine and dust as we wound our way up narrow logging roads, the kind that twist through the forest like forgotten veins. The sun beat down relentlessly, turning the Jeep into an oven. But up here, at least the breeze carried a hint of coolness. We didn't have a plan, just a tank of gas, a couple of water bottles, and a vague idea of finding something interesting. For an hour, we drove deeper into the wilderness, the trees growing denser, the roads rougher, until civilization felt like a distant memory. Then we hit a clearing. It wasn't much, just a wide patch of grass surrounded by towering pines, their branches so thick they blocked out most of the sky. The place was unnaturally still, no birds chirping, no squirrels rustling, just the faint hum of the wind through the needles. In the middle of the clearing, right where the grass met the trees, stood a picnic table. But this wasn't your average park bench. It was painted a garish orange, the kind of color that screams for attention, and it was huge, way too big for a normal picnic. I'm 5'10", and the benches came up to my chest. I'd have to climb just to sit on it. Mark pulled the Jeep to a stop, and we both stared at it. "What the hell is that doing here?" I said, stepping out onto the dry grass. The crunch under my boots sounded too loud in the silence. "No clue," Mark replied, scratching his head. "Maybe some hunters painted it up? Looks new, though." I walked closer, running my hand along the table's edge. The paint was fresh, not a single chip or scratch, and the wood smelled faintly of varnish. It didn't make sense. This wasn't a campsite or a ranger station. There were no signs, no tire tracks, nothing to suggest anyone had been here. The grass around it was tall and untouched, swaying slightly in the breeze. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck, like the forest was holding its breath, watching us. That's when Mark tapped my shoulder, his voice low. "Ethan, check that out." I followed his gaze to the tree line. At first, I didn't see anything, just shadows and branches. Then I spotted it, a small tent, barely visible, tucked about 50 feet into the woods. It was a dull green, blending with the pines, but a sliver of sunlight caught on its fabric, giving it away. My stomach dropped. Someone was out here with us. "Think it's abandoned?" Mark asked, squinting at it. I shrugged, but my gut said no. "Maybe. Let's take a look." We grabbed our flashlights from the Jeep, more out of habit than necessity, since it was still daylight, and started toward the trees. The air grew cooler as we stepped into the shade, the pines closing in around us like a tunnel. My boots sank into the soft earth, and every snap of a twig underfoot made me flinch. I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on me, hidden somewhere in the darkness between the trunks. When we reached the tent, I hesitated. It was small, barely big enough for one person, with a zipper that looked brand new. No campfire, no signs of life. Just silence. My heart was pounding now, a dull thud in my ears. "Hello," I called, my voice cracking slightly. "Anyone in there?" Nothing. Not a rustle, not a whisper. Mark nudged me. "Go on, check it out." I swallowed hard and crouched down, my fingers trembling as I gripped the zipper. What if someone was inside? What if they were hurt? Or worse? I pulled it open in one quick motion, half expecting a scream or a lunge. Instead, I was hit with a wave of musty air, tinged with something sweet, like cheap perfume. The tent was packed, stuffed to the brim with women's clothes. Dresses, sweaters, jeans, even underwear, all folded neatly into stacks. Beside them were 3 backpacks, bulging with stuff I couldn't quite make out. I shone my flashlight inside and spotted a hairbrush, a tube of toothpaste, and a small silver necklace dangling from one of the packs. "What the hell?" I muttered, rocking back on my heels. My mind raced. Whose stuff was this? Why leave it out here, in the middle of nowhere? Mark peered over my shoulder, his face pale. "This is messed up, man. Looks like someone's living here. Or was." "Yeah, but where are they?" I said, scanning the trees. The forest felt tighter now, the shadows deeper. I zipped the tent shut, my hands clammy. "Let's get out of here." We turned back toward the Jeep, moving faster than we'd come. The picnic table loomed ahead, its orange paint glowing unnaturally bright against the muted greens and browns of the clearing. I couldn't shake the image of those clothes, folded so carefully, like someone had planned to come back. My skin crawled with the thought that they might be close, watching us right now. We were halfway to the Jeep when Mark grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "Ethan, look." I followed his pointing finger and froze. A beat-up Ford Taurus was rolling slowly into the clearing from the opposite side, its rusted frame creaking as it came to a stop. 2 men sat in the front. Big guys, their faces shadowed under baseball caps. A third figure slumped in the back seat, pressed against the window, staring straight at us. My blood turned cold. They weren't moving, just sitting there, watching. "Get in the Jeep," I hissed, shoving Mark toward the driver's side. My legs felt like jelly, but I forced them to move, diving into the passenger seat as Mark fumbled with the keys. The engine roared to life, and he floored it, kicking up dirt as we sped toward the road we'd come in on. The Taurus lurched forward, cutting across the grass to block us. "They're trying to trap us," Mark yelled, yanking the wheel hard. The Jeep swerved, tires screeching, narrowly missing their front bumper. I caught a glimpse of the driver, bald with a thick beard, his eyes locked on me like a predator sizing up prey. The guy next to him grinned, teeth yellow and crooked, while the backseat figure, a gaunt man with wild hair, banged on the glass, his mouth moving in silent words I couldn't make out. Mark gunned it down the road, the Jeep bouncing over ruts and rocks. I twisted in my seat, watching the Taurus spin around in the grass, its engine growling as it gave chase. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Faster, Mark, they're coming." "I'm trying," he shouted, his knuckles white on the wheel. The trees blurred past us, branches scraping the sides of the Jeep as we took hairpin turns at breakneck speed. Every jolt rattled my bones, but I kept my eyes glued to the rearview mirror. The Taurus was gaining, its headlights flashing through the dust cloud we'd kicked up. For what felt like forever, we raced through the forest, the road narrowing until it was barely wide enough for one car. My mind spun with panic. What did they want? Were they after the stuff in the tent? Or us? I gripped the door handle, ready to jump if it came to that. Finally, we hit a wider stretch, and Mark swerved to the side, letting the Taurus shoot past. As it did, I saw the driver glare at us, his face twisted with fury, before he veered off onto a side trail and disappeared into the trees. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by our ragged breathing. "We're alive," Mark said, his voice shaky. He pulled over, hands trembling as he shut off the engine. Barely, I replied, wiping sweat from my forehead. What the hell was that? We sat there for a minute, catching our breath, before I pulled out my phone and called the state police. I told them everything: the table, the tent, the clothes, the chase. The officer on the line sounded skeptical, but said they'd send someone to check it out. The next day, I got a call back. We found the clearing and the table, the officer said. But there's no tent, no backpacks, nothing like you described, just some tire marks. What about the Taurus? I asked. No sign of it. The plate you gave us doesn't match anything local. I hung up, frustration boiling in my chest. They'd cleaned it up fast, too fast. But that orange table was still there, a glaring reminder that something had happened. Months later, I convinced my girlfriend Jessica to drive back with me. I needed to see it again, to prove I wasn't losing my mind. The road was as desolate as I remembered, overgrown, with weeds, the air dry and heavy. When we reached the clearing, my stomach sank. The table was still there, but it had been moved, dragged 50 yards closer to the road. One leg snapped clean off, tilting it into the dirt. The brake looked fresh, the wood splintered and pale. Jessica shivered beside me. This place feels wrong, Ethan. Yeah, I said, stepping closer. That's when I saw the footprints. Fresh, deep impressions in the soil, leading from the table into the woods where the tent had been. I followed them, my pulse quickening with every step. The trail ended at a flattened patch of ground, littered with a few stray items: a crushed water bottle, a torn magazine page, and a single high-heeled shoe, half buried in the dirt. Jessica grabbed my arm. Let's go, now. As we turned back, a sharp crack echoed from the trees, like a branch snapping under weight. I spun around, scanning the shadows, but saw nothing. The wind picked up, rustling the pines, and I swore I heard a low whisper carried on it, a sound that wasn't the forest. We bolted to the jeep and peeled out, the clearing shrinking in the rearview mirror. I don't know who those men were, what they were hiding, or whose clothes filled that tent. But I know one thing: whatever happened out there, it wasn't over. And every time I close my eyes, I see that orange table, standing alone in the silence, waiting.